Hey friends, Dean here. Before we get you on to your episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to our next virtual online trivia night. Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Join us either on our Facebook group or on our YouTube page for 3 rounds of fun trivia, music questions, movie questions, general knowledge questions. It'll be a fun time and a chance to win some prizes and have just a good relaxing night of some trivia at home. You don't even have to go out for it. So don't forget, Wednesday, March 13th at 8 p.m. Join us on our Facebook group or YouTube for 3 rounds of fun virtual online trivia. We'll see you there. In this episode, we return to the Marvel Cinematic Universe after a 2-year theatrical hiatus with Black Widow. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff, and Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome to the 3324 podcast. If you're new, welcome aboard. We appreciate you. And if you're returning, thank you so much for your support. Just as appreciated, just as much. Either way, if you're new or returning, if you would subscribe, this way you don't miss any new episodes, that'd be fantastic. And if you are on Apple, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, a rating and review would actually be even more helpful too. So either way, however you listen, we appreciate it. Right, Eric?
That's right. So how are you, Dean?
Doing good. How's things?
Good. So here we are, our first Marvel film.
Yeah, first Marvel film. It's the first. There's a lot of firsts that this film kind of encapsulates, right? It's our first episode about a Marvel film. Mm-hmm. It's the first film in the phase 4 of the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So when we say MCU, if you're new to Marvel, when we say MCU, we mean the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that means all the Marvel films. So we'll just kind of get that definition out of the way, and we'll just use MCU going forward. And it's also the first Marvel film to premiere in the theaters and simultaneously on Disney Plus, which is the streaming platform.
Yes.
A lot of first time boxes getting checked off there.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, it was meant to be released last year. Sadly, it couldn't because of the pandemic, obviously. So I guess the decision was made to premiere it on Disney Plus simultaneously. I don't think that was Kevin Feige's plan.
Yeah, no, they had to they rescheduled it 3 times. They kept pushing the date back,
right?
3 times because of the pandemic. They didn't know if it would, when things would quote unquote get back to normal.
Yeah,
and eventually 2020 just ended up being off the table entirely. Reluctant to go to streaming. They did not, the Marvel properties was kind of a theatrical experience, and I think they were trying to preserve that.
That's right,
as much as possible. But time starts running out too. You've got this investment, you've spent the money, you've made the film.
Yeah, it's been literally sitting in the can for
2 years.
For 2 years.
Yeah, they filmed it in 2019.
Yeah, they didn't go back and change anything. They didn't, do any and make any amendments to the film. It was ready to go, and it's been sitting around for quite a while. And I feel it's kind of a shame because I kind of feel like it might have been a little overshadowed by the series that premiered on Disney Plus with, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and because they decided to roll those out before releasing the film. So
those were going to be streaming anyway. So that was just a matter of, okay, do we mix around some dates? But that was always going to be that venue for those for Loki, for WandaVision, and for Falcon and Winter Soldier. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of things to it. That the last Marvel film was Spider-Man. Was it Far From Home?
Yeah.
So that came out in July 2nd of 2019. So there's been 2 years without a Marvel movie in the theaters, and that might not necessarily be a bad thing as well.
Right. We did take a little bit of a break.
Yes. I think we had the break forced on us. I don't think it's a bad thing.
Well, I mean, it was, and what a good place to stop. Endgame could have been the stopping point, but then they decided to release Spider-Man after, and as a sort of epilogue.
Yeah, it was the last one of phase 3.
That's right.
Which closed it out kind of what happened after the snap. We're gonna get geeky and Marvel-y here. So
yeah,
if you haven't seen any of the Marvel films, there's a lot to go over, and we're certainly not going to do it in this episode. So we'll kind of try and keep it as generic as possible, but we will talk spoilers in this film. And to be upfront, there's not a whole lot that's spoilery in this film. So we're not really going to be ruining too much. It's not like Endgame or actually Infinity War. It doesn't have those kind of stakes. It is a smaller film, but nevertheless, there's not those big reveals. And the end credits scene, there is one, but it's not a gigantic reveal and not anything I don't feel uncomfortable talking about it, because I don't think it really ruins much. It actually sets up some stuff that's on the way. So
right, and this is a prequel film. Chronologically, takes place after the events in Civil War, which was the 13th film in the series.
I mean, is it a prequel or is it a midquel? Because a prequel kind of says, well, this happened before a bunch of stuff, but they're kind of inserting it in between.
I think it's a little bit of both, really, because it does flash back. There are some things that they address in the beginning of the film. So
that's true.
But
they're kind of sliding this in between the ending of Civil War and then the events in between Infinity War.
Mm-hmm.
So actually 2 war films, Civil War and Infinity War, and Black Widow kind of takes place right in between those.
Okay.
So so let's talk the stats. We'll go through the cast and we'll talk about the film.
Sure. Let's do it.
I think that's how a podcast go. I think that's how our podcasts go. Anyway,
pretty much. That's the format,
that's right? I don't think I'm revealing anything out of the ordinary by saying that. But
I don't think we need to tell anybody.
Yeah, I felt the need just to kind of lay out the agenda, as it were. Like
maybe it's because Marvel is such a long thing to talk about. Maybe we're just in that headspace.
It's a beast. Big, and it's a lot to talk about, and this film actually lends itself to talking about it singularly, actually. Because it was inserted in between 2 films, and it's not directly tied to those films. So it's a good thing. This is a good entree for us, as it were. So released July 9th, 2021 in theaters and on Disney Plus. As we discussed, that was the strategy, or that was the decision that had to be made to get this film out. The rest of the slate that's coming later in 2021 with Spider-Man and then Doctor Strange, I believe those are going to be theatrical releases only. This was directed by Kate Shortland, and this is her 4th feature film, and this is like by far the biggest thing she's ever done. Yeah, by far the biggest thing she's ever done. The budget was $200 million. They spent a pretty penny. They certainly didn't skimp. Okay, and here we go into the cast. So Scarlett Johansson plays Natasha Romanoff, aka the Black Widow. Florence Pugh plays Yelena Belova. David Harbour plays Alexei Shostakov, also known as the Red Guardian. We'll call him the Red Guardian.
Stranger Things fans out there, he's Hopper in Stranger Things, so.
and he was Hellboy in the reboot.
Yeah,
so he's no stranger to this kind of stuff. Rachel Weisz is Melina Vostokov, aka the original Black Widow. Ray Winston, which is a curious casting choice, is Dreykov. And we'll talk about Ray Winston is just...
We're going to go there. That's right.
William Hurt, and William Hurt is Thunderbolt Ross. So he's really the only character that's been in other Marvel films that's making an appearance in this one.
Yeah.
Except for the very end. But as far as major MCU, he was in Civil War, he was in Incredible Hulk, and he's kind of popped up here and there in Infinity War, etc. So he makes an appearance too. Like we said, this was supposed to be released in 2020, but was held back due to the pandemic, so it came out in 2021. A decent cast. There's a lot of big names in this film, which is good. I like that they got like David Harbour and Rachel Weisz. I love Ray Winston. I mean, he was great as French in The Departed. And I think he was in Beowulf, didn't they? He was when they did the motion capture. That he certainly wasn't his
the voice
body,
of
though.
Beowulf. No way. So another odd cast.
Yeah, Ray Winston is kind of a barrel-chested kind of
heavy set.
Is it Irish, Scottish, English?
I don't know.
Heavy accent.
He's got some kind of a brogue, and it's just
heavy. He's got a heavy brogue.
Yeah.
So he's playing a Russian in this, and it was a little murky. I got to be honest. I'm listening, and I'm just like, oh, that kind of sounds like French from The Departed. And then he kind of got into the Russian accent. He's not in it a whole hell of a lot. That's all your main stats. Let's get into the plot of this film. Like I said, we're going to go through it. Like I said, not too many spoilers. There's not a ton to give away, so we're just going to kind of go through. We're not going to. There's nothing in here that's earth shattering that has so many implications. But basically, Black Widow's on the run.
Right.
So after the Sokovia Accords basically fell apart in the events in Civil War, some superheroes were incarcerated. Some are free because they're abiding by the Sokovia Accords, and then some are on the run.
And Widow was on Iron Man's side. She was all for signing the Accords, and then she was the wild card in that film. So she kind of changed sides, and that's why she's on the run. So
her heart wasn't totally in it.
Right.
But she's on the run, and as is, just to kind of fill in the background, Steve Rogers, Captain America, is also on the run.
Yes.
So that's where that kind of Civil War kind of leaves off with that. Is the Avengers have been torn apart, disassembled from within by Baron Zemo, and in array and in tatters, and friendships have been shattered, and allegiances and all that stuff. So they're it's basically the Avengers are pretty much done at this point. So she's
breaking up of a family.
Yeah,
is what it is. Yep.
So it starts off where she's going to a safe house. We start off with the movie starts off with a little backstory about when they were young, and a family, and there's the mother and father, which is Rachel Weisz and David Harbour, and then there's the two children, the daughter Natasha and the other daughter Yelena. And what we find out though is they're not really a family. They're Russian spies living in America, and there comes that scene where they got to get out of town pretty quick. They've gotten the intel that they needed, and it's time to go.
Yep.
Which is it's kind of a neat scene. I kind of dug it. They're getting their stuff together, and then it's revealed that the father, David Harbour, is not just a person. He's probably a super soldier, because he takes a dumpster or dump truck or whatever and kind of flips it over when they're trying to get the plane out. So you already see that he's an enhanced human.
Right. Anyway, he was an experiment, but not quite the way he wanted it to be. He wanted to be the Russian Captain America, pretty much, and he wanted to be the big hero. And I guess things didn't turn out that way for him, because he was always in the shadows doing these little missions,
undercover. 3 years pretending to be a family with these people.
Yeah.
Pretty decent action scene though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the casting choices I thought for the children, I thought were great. The girl that plays Natasha, she does look a little bit like Scarlett Johansson. I thought that was great. And it deceives you. You honestly do think that this could be her family. I kind of thought of it as a kind of a dream. Is she dreaming? Is this? Yeah, they kind of deceive you into and I totally unexpected that they would be in America when she would be in America as a kid, and so yeah, they're really playing up on the family thing here. That's kind of the theme, kind of is current throughout the film. So yeah, they're on the run. They're being chased by S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't know if you noticed that, but the trucks that were following them were S.H.I.E.L.D. I caught that the second time when I watched it. But yeah, they managed to escape, and then they end up in Cuba, right?
Of course, where the Russians go.
Where they're met by their compadres there. And I think this was the first appearance of Ray Winston. So he comes out. Right. So, he's we find out that he's the man in charge. He's the major villain. Something really strange happens where the children at this point are being taken away. And Rachel Weisz has been shot. She's mortally wounded. The kids think she's actually dead, I think, at this point. And the kids are kind of, they're injected in their neck. And David Harbour is like telling them it'll be okay. It's for Mother Russia. And this, it's we're supposed to do this and all this kind of stuff. So, you get the sense that this is their father, like abandoning them, and they're being taken away for some strange reason, which of course,
he's already talking to Ray Winston's character though about, I want to get out, I've done this for 3 years. I
want to be Captain America. Yeah.
before the children get injected and kind of drugged, Natasha kind of grabs a gun and she's threatening, even as a child, because she states she knows what's going to happen. She already, I think she said she had been through what's called the Red Room program. She knew that they were going to take her quote unquote sister, who isn't really her sister, but take her and put her through that. And it basically it's mutilation, it's mind control, it's a whole bunch of stuff where you just lose your identity and you become something else. And she had already been through it in some form or another, Natasha. And she did not want this person that was her younger sister to go through it as well. But yeah, that's when the quote unquote father comes over and says, oh, it'll be all right. And then they inject him and take him off. And everyone kind of goes their separate ways. Yeah, the mother is shot. We don't know what happens to her. They put her in a truck and drive off. The father's talking with the main villain, like, hey, I did this now. I want to get back into things, kind of like that. And the kids are drugged and taken away. And then we flash forward.
Now, it's important to note that this was set up in previous films, in the first two Avengers films. That Joss Whedon set up the Red Room. That she's, Natasha talks about having read in her ledger. There's something that she did as a Russian spy that she's not particularly proud of. And then in the second Avengers film, Age of Ultron, we actually do see a little bit of that, of her being trained. Of course, she's Scarlett Johansson, and that she's not a little girl, which is kind of odd. But at some point, they were trained as little girls, and that's when all the brainwashing and
to become basically assassins, killers.
Exactly. So
they're controlled by someone else to do whatever needs to get done. If it's killing, if it's explosives, whatever it is, these other Black Widows. Are, so Black Widow isn't just a specific term, it's a generic term to what all these women are trained or abducted. They're basically abducted and trained and mutilated, so they can't ever have children. So they've got no identity basically. And then they're trained and have this mind control to become just basically assassins and just kind of do the bidding of others. So we pick up in present day with a bunch of Black Widows that are looking. They're on rooftops and they're kind of hunting this woman. And this is where we meet Yelena. And Florence she's a Black Widow, also played by Florence Pugh. And there's a little scuffle. And basically what happens is all these women that have mind control, there's actually an antidote. And if you get dosed with it, you come out of it and you become, you kind of come to realization and you come to yourself.
Yeah.
And Yelena gets dosed by the woman they were hunting was a previous Black Widow who had been quote unquote freed. We'll use that as the term. She had been freed. So she, before she dies, she doses Yelena and frees her. And she kind of realizes what's happening and kind of they have a little tracking chip in their leg. She gets rid of that. And then she goes on the run. The widows kind of go after her as well, but she gets away.
A little comment about Florence Pugh in this film. Let's just get this out of the way, because she absolutely steals the show, in my opinion.
Yeah, she's really good.
I think she is the best part of this film. So as Yelena. Meanwhile, we cut to widow Scarlett Johansson, and we mentioned that she was contacted by Ross, who was telling her, she's like telling him, "Don't do this, don't come after me, you'll regret it." All this stuff. And he's, of course, he's hell-bent on capturing her, throwing her in the raft with all the other Avengers that did not go with the Sokovia Accords, because that's what Ross does. That's his agenda. And yeah, he was looking pretty pale in this movie, pretty timid, because they had mentioned in Civil War that he had a heart attack, and she's joking that, "Oh, is this your second bypass now?" Because he looks really frail in this film. And so you kind of get the sense that there's, I don't know if they're going to bring him back or not, but yeah, she gets away. She is, of course, she's along the way. She has contacts, little allies, and she meets up with this young. I guess he kind of outfits her with supplies and whatever she needs. He kind of gets it for off the black market and that kind of thing. So he sets her up in this little trailer in the middle of nowhere. It's like, where is it? Was it Norway, I think it was, or somewhere.
I don't even know where it was.
I forget where. Did they mention where it was?
I don't think they did. It was just kind of like in the middle of nowhere, and it's kind of okay. Here you go. You're set, and I'm leaving. And he kind of leaves her just because she's kind of going, laying low for things to blow over, and eventually she needs to go into town to get gas.
Yeah,
because the generator ran out of gas, so she goes into town to get gas. and she gets attacked by what is, I guess, the secondary villain, but they really made it seem like this was the major villain, which is the Taskmaster, who has appeared in the comics. So Taskmaster is not this made up villain, but Taskmaster is a super villain who can emulate any type of fighting style, any superhero the Taskmaster sees. Taskmaster is able to emulate the fighting style, can use the bow and arrow like Hawkeye, has a shield like Captain America, is just able to basically mimic anything. So the Taskmaster shoots a whatever at Natasha's vehicle, and it almost goes off the bridge. She's getting ready to fight. Turns out the Taskmaster actually isn't looking for her, because what had happened, that guy, the connection that got her set up, gave her stuff from the Budapest, which came up in the first Avengers movie, the whole Budapest thing with Hawkeye. But here's
they have history,
the stuff that was in the Budapest safe house or whatever it was, and there was like a little kind of like plastic, looked like a little very small briefcase or carrying case. So it turns out that the Taskmaster is after that case, not necessarily after Black Widow. So they fight a little bit, and you can see that Taskmaster is immediately able to mimic her fighting style. So it's pretty much a draw, if at all.
I find it kind of odd that the character of the Taskmaster, where I'd like to know if and when he met Captain America to mimic his fighting style, and when did he fight Hawkeye to shoot a bow and arrow?
They show the Taskmaster watching videos.
Okay,
of
that all it is, or is it?
I guess that's what it just needs to see. It doesn't actually need to fight, but to see those see footage.
Could it have been that he did encounter them along? Because don't forget, they're on the run too.
Yeah,
I'm thinking maybe somewhere along the way that they might have fought at some point, because
they don't make a mention. It's like the first so appearance of Taskmaster, and
right.
What would be the we don't know if it's the last, but that fight kind of goes on. Natasha then realizes that Taskmaster isn't after her, whatever's in this little container. So she actually is able to get the container. It's got the vials, and what it is the vials of that antidote that frees the widows. So she's able to grab that, evade the Taskmaster, and live to fight another day. So that means she's got to go to Budapest. And so she goes to Budapest, back to the safe house, encounters her sister, quote unquote, Yelena. They scuffle while they get to know each other again, I guess. I'm not sure why that fight was there.
Well, I think Yelena held it against her that she joined the Avengers, that she left, never came back.
But why did they fight?
Well, some resentment there, I guess. I don't know.
Then they said truce, and then they're hugging. It was just a weird. It just seemed out of place. Like it just was like a filler.
Okay.
So Yelena was one that sent the antidote to Natasha in the hopes that the Avengers would come and end this whole Red Room thing. And meanwhile, Natasha thought that the Red Room program was over. She thought that the main villain, Ray Winston's Dreykov character, was dead. That's what she needed to do to get to join S.H.I.E.L.D. was to kill Dreykov. Like that would be the proof that she can defect to S.H.I.E.L.D. And the collateral damage was using his daughter as bait. So the daughter went into where Dreykov was. She saw the daughter was there, gave the all clear. They blow up the building, and both of them are supposedly dead. But it turns out that Dreykov is not dead. He's alive. And he's been making more widows and controlling them and all this. And Natasha was not aware of it. She thought that she had ended that.
So this is revealed in this scene, the exchange between her and Yelena. Yelena is basically telling her all this through exposition. This is her Red Ledger moment. This is the thing that she was ashamed of all these years, that she actually killing the daughter. Right. So, and this was her recruiting moment. So, and this is what in the scene in the battle in New York in the first Avengers film, her and Hawkeye are joking. This is a lot like Budapest, and he goes, you and I have very different way of thinking about Budapest, or something to that effect. And so, but you find out that this is where they've been hiding. This is what they're talking about in those films. So
the safe house is there, and then seemingly out of nowhere, Black Widows start to show up. and and just
all hell breaks loose.
Converge on the safe house. They evade one of them. One widow gets hurt. She falls from a rooftop. Mm-hmm. And before Yelena can give her an antidote to free her, Dreykov commands her remotely to kill herself. So she's out of the picture. And then the Taskmaster shows back up again, mm-hmm. and starts attacking. So there's a car chase. The Taskmaster emulates Hawkeye. Taskmaster pulls out the bow and arrow, shoots the explosive arrow. The car just goes flying through the air, flipping and flying,
and they walk away.
Yeah,
pretty much a couple scratches, unscathed, which I found kind of baffling. There's a lot of that happening in this film. Apparently, there's a lot of crashes, a lot of like explosions where they seem to, and they're not really superheroes. So is it implied that at some point, did they take super soldier serum at some point too?
No.
Do you believe that that's a thing? Because it is. Nope. There is a comic to that effect, I believe.
There is, but I only in the movie they only mentioned that certain girls are predisposed to being Black Widows, but there's nothing about they have no super. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the woman that fell off the roof would have been fine.
That's true.
So and this is, I think, one of the when we get to our kind of breakdown of what we liked and didn't like, I think we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
But no, they're just humans. They just have this the extra training and all that kind of stuff. Weapons experts, all that great stuff. But just people, mm-hmm. people. So they evade. They end up evading Taskmaster. They get out of that situation, and then they realize that if the Red Room is still operating, they need to shut that down and destroy it. They need to stop it, especially now since they know there's a way to free them also, and they have this antidote. So the next item on the agenda for them is to break out their dad. Is the Red Guardian, and because he's in jail, he's been in a Russian jail all this time, just kind of sitting in jail, even though he's super powered. He just sat in jail, did not ever try and break out, mm-hmm. and just was kind of there and spends his days telling stories of how he fought Captain America when he really didn't.
Right.
And arm wrestling people and just kind of boasting and kind of
getting heavy, getting fat,
and making his resume out to be bigger than it actually was. Mm-hmm. So they get to break him out. There's another big action scene there with the helicopter and getting him through past all the guards, and there's a big avalanche and they get him out. And because he should know where Dreykov is. He was like the right-hand guy. The last time they saw their father he was with him. He was with Dreykov. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, let's bust him out because he'll be able to lead us to him. And that turns out to be a big donut hole.
Yeah, he'll show us. He'll show us where the Red Room is, and
he doesn't know because he's like, I'm in jail. What do you think they did with me? They threw me in jail. I didn't even get to ever do anything. I never got to be Red Guardian. Because he's mm-hmm. He's Red Guardian. He's basically the Russian Captain America. And he was just been sitting and rotting in a jail for all this time. So he has no clue. Mm-hmm. But the big reveal is, well, maybe Melina does, which is Rachel Weisz's character. And they thought that she was dead.
She was dead. Mama Melina, she's alive. And he's like, yes, she's alive. And, she's resilient. And so and
she's working on that project.
Yeah.
She was doing some other research. So they get themselves together. They find out where she is, where Melina is. So they have the family reunion, which is a really nice bunch of scenes. It's kind of trying to, they're all individuals at this point, but they are acknowledging that they did spend some time together as a family. And
so it's a nice little scene. They actually sit down at the table and they're having this family dinner and they're doing shots of vodka and
and it's a weird dynamic because they all now know that they really weren't a family, and
right.
They all have different feelings about it. Yelena feels like, well, this, even though it was fake, this was the most amount of family I ever had.
That's right. And she shows that emotion and the resentment.
And Red Guardian really doesn't. To him, it was a job. It was a waste of time. He should have been out fighting. So they're all coming at it from different perspectives. And Melina, Rachel Weisz's character, is a little more reserved, just a little more closer to the vest with stuff.
Yeah,
not as emotion, doesn't really show her emotions.
Right. She's the practical one. She's the one that has to be. I mean, because she's, And
then Natasha is the realist. She's kind of like, this is all this ever was. It wasn't real. It was just
And she pretty much calls, but she calls him out on them, like, you're a coward. Melina's a coward. You are just a fool,
Yep.
Alexei, there have been, a few like comments made about her performance in this scene, Scarlett Johansson, that she didn't show enough emotion. I didn't have a problem with it though, because she's just being, like you say, she is the realist, and she is.
Yeah, Florence Pugh had the more emotional scenes and the more emotional lines, because
it's all told through her character, right?
Because she was, she was the one that was really upset of like, you were my father, you were my mother, and you were my sister. I don't know my real parents, so you were it. And for you to say it wasn't real, so Florence Pugh gets a lot of the good meaty acting scenes to react to, because
all the emotion, all the jokes, all the good wisecracks are hers,
because she's trying to bring everybody together. She's the one is saying this was my family and this was real, and you can't ever take that away.
That's right.
It happened. Mm-hmm. So she's kind of the emotional glue that's holding these three other people together that are kind of just in different spaces in their lives and are looking at it maybe through a little more realistic lens.
Yeah. So there is, she gets up from the table, grabs a bottle of vodka, disappears into the bedroom. Yelena, sorry. David Harbour gets up from the table and goes after her, which is another really nice scene.
And he stuffed his body into the Red Guardian outfit
that's right.
that Melina had. She still had it and never washed it. So one of the first things he does when he gets there is he stuffs himself into the Red Guardian outfit, and then he wears it for the rest of he wears it just like that's his regular clothing. Is like he just wears the outfit for the whole time. So he's walking around in this 3 sizes too small superhero outfit. So there's this helmet, that he kind of like pushes on his head.
I honestly think they were really kind of playing up on The Incredibles. There's a little bit of influence there. I think there's also a nod to, Fat Thor.
Yeah.
And then there's this, the scene where he comes into the room. It's a rather nice scene, and he's basically trying to talk to Yelena, and he's trying to comfort her in his own weird way. In the beginning, when they were kids, they were in the car and they would be listening to American Pie by Don McLean. That's the big song in the film, that the needle drop, and he starts singing the song with her. So it's a really nice scene. It kind of, it's that nice moment where they bond. However, then meanwhile, Melina and Natasha are talking, and what we don't know at this point, something happens where again they found them. The widows have come.
Well, Melina said, I activated the Red Room.
Yeah.
So they're on their way. On them, yeah, they're on their way. So she basically ratted everybody out because she's still working. She's training. She's working with pigs and working on this kind of serum or whatever to control them, to make them do whatever you want them to, which is basically what the widows are doing. So she's kind of like on that baseline research and doing all that with pigs.
Yeah. And
she said, I activated, or I called the Red Room. So there's widows that are going to be on the way. Just, very quickly. So they all end up getting rounded up and captured, basically.
Yeah.
And taken to, and the reason why Dreykov is so elusive and why he was never found is because he's in this kind of floating fortress in the sky. Mm-hmm. Not like a SHIELD helicarrier, but kind of along the same lines of this thing. It's in the clouds.
It's the Russian version of,
yeah, it kind of looks like Skylab kind of turned long ways. Right. It's kind of like this long oblong cylindrical thing with these different pieces that come out of it. And that's kind of like this kind of in the sky is where the Red Room is where the women that get abducted or girls get abducted to get trained up there. And this is where he's kind of the man behind the curtain. He's the influencer by using the widows. And that's how he has the most amount of power, is by staying anonymous, which he basically.
So because Yelena came out of it, and she, so he decides that for some weird reason they want to do some kind of, because she came out of it, I guess they want to experiment on her, on her brain. So she's on a table. Meanwhile, Natasha and Red Guardian are both in separate cells. So they're sitting in separate cells. He's up there in his office with Melina. And this is where we need to comment on Ray Winstone's character, because he is very, very creepy in this film. He gets in people's faces. Like he is probably one of the worst villains. And what I mean by worse, most effective villains in the MCU, because he's just a scumbag. He's just there is nothing taking little girls and doing this to them. It's almost like he's he's
very slimy,
very slimy,
very slimy.
And so he's like, he's kind of sitting there with Milena, and he's like in her face, like getting real close and like talking, like, it's just like, back off, dude,
Yeah.
And then he goes to touch her. She pulls away, and then he goes to touch her again and realizes that it's a trick. Milena is actually wearing the mask, or the sort of digital.
Natasha's wearing the Milena mask.
The Milena mask, like she did in Winter Soldier. Right.
Yep. So she's got this fake, it's like it's almost like an electronic type of a mask, almost like a CG thing that you wear, like a net mesh over your face, which I thought
at first I thought, the first time I saw that, I was like, where did she get the hair, like, and then I realized that they were once it's revealed that they actually switched places and they plan to get captured. So Milena's actually working with them, and did she turn them in, but then realize that she'd be working with them? So that's kind of like sketchy there.
Yep.
We don't really know. And then, there's like all these things are happening at once. So they cut away to that. They cut away to, now it's revealed that it's Milena in the other cell. Red Guardian's sitting there, and he starts feeling sorry for himself, much like Thor, which I thought was a little too on the nose. They're like, okay, we're playing this up again. He's heavy set. He's feeling, and then before he could even continue, which is a nice little joke that they're kind of like joking about this and turning it on its head, was her saying, hey, I built these cells. You can get out now because the door is open.
Yeah.
And he's like sitting there like, I can't do anything. I can, I should have been there. I should have whatever. And she's like, you can escape now. The door's open because I built these things.
Yeah, he's like a buffoon. He's a buffoon.
He's like a buffoon. Like Milena is like,
he's mostly a buffoon that probably lucked into getting the super soldier serum. And obviously they didn't use
comedy
him
relief.
They didn't really use him for that. They ended up throwing him in jail, and he was such a buffoon that he stayed there.
Right.
Which that he didn't even try and get out.
It explains why he's not Red Guardian. It's because he's just,
So the identity swap happens where they were, Natasha was using that mask technology, and you kind of see it in Milena's house. She has like an armory room, and you can see there's two mannequin heads back there.
She's got the mask, all the wigs.
She's got the same technology and that whole face swapping thing, the masking.
Yep.
So she gets revealed. She's going to kill Dreykov, but she can't, because Dreykov emits a pheromone to all these women that make them, because of their programming, make them unable to do.
They can't turn on them, right?
And even if they've been freed, they can't turn on them unless they sever a nerve that's in their forehead or in their nose, because then they won't be able to smell. So as long as you can smell, he is immune from being killed by any of the women because of the pheromone that he emits. So she's not able to do that.
Right.
So now he's kind of got the upper hand, and he's talking, and the Taskmaster is there. So the reveal is that the Taskmaster is not a man, but the Taskmaster is his daughter, who survived that explosion in the beginning. Her face was scarred up, and he implanted a chip into her that would make her able to mimic any type of fighting style, and any type of anything she sees, she can mimic it, so no one would ever be able to beat her. And then he sends Taskmaster away. So it's just those two in the room. A lot of, like Eric said, a lot of exposition that explains what's going on, what the plans are, how he controls everything. She gets him talking, which is what she's good at. That's what she does, and that's a callback to this scene where she's kind of playing the damsel in distress and letting him talk, as a callback to her scene in Avengers with Loki.
That's right.
Where she's just kind of playing like this, playing it down and just letting the villain talk. And then she says basically the same thing as thank you for your cooperation, because she got everything she needed from him.
And
she got the intel.
She like pretends that he's getting into her head and like Yuling Quim and all this stuff.
Yeah. So then she slams her head on the table, severs the nerve in her nose, so she can't smell, and then just starts delivering the beatdown.
That's right.
To him, delivering the beatdown.
And at this point, they're trying to escape, and Milena accidentally happens to shoot in there while they're escaping. She, there's a lot of gunplay and there's a lot of stuff happening. She happens to damage one of the engines keeping this thing up.
Yeah.
In the sky. So it's, now the whole thing's falling apart, much like, this is classic James Bond right here. All these old James Bond movies come to mind. It's the same, they meet the villain, he gets the upper hand and things change, and it becomes very, very familiar territory here, where everything's falling apart around them. And, the whole thing is basically
ready to explode.
Right.
Everything's blowing up. And during this time, Yelena actually had a knife hidden on her uniform by Milena, and before she's about to get operated on, she's given the location of that. She's got a little earpiece that was put in and said, hey, you've got a knife by your right hand side or whatever. She whips out and makes short work of the surgeons. They're no match for her.
Right.
She's able to grab all the doses of the antidote that will free them. So she's on her way to the Red Room, because she's going to go to the Red Room and just explode the, blast the doses and just free all the women in the Red Room. Mm-hmm. She gets there, the room is empty. And that's because the widows are on their way to take care of Natasha and and basically kind of do her in, and that's going to be the end of hers through the widows, not through the Taskmaster, who should have really been the one that did it, but he had summoned the widows anyway. Mm-hmm. And Dreykov basically walks out of there. He's like, they're gonna take care of it for you.
He's like, bye.
Yeah, he's like, I'm out of here, because this is how he his MO. It's his MO. Is he doesn't get his hands dirty, right? Very rarely. So they kind of go in. All the widows are there, and she's reluctant to fight them, but she has to fight them. But they eventually get the upper hand over her. Mm-hmm. There's so many of them. I mean, it's just and they all have those, the wrist rocket type of thing that, and Natasha's kind of shooting them with the wrist thing, and
she's holding her own.
Black widows everywhere.
Natasha, of course, is holding her own because she's an Avenger, so. But
eventually they get her, and they start delivering kick. They just start taking turns on her.
Yeah.
Kicking. All of them are just in turn. And then all of a sudden you see this shatter of kind of red, and Yelena came in.
Right.
And she exploded the antidote, so it kind of drizzles over all the widows, and they get freed. And they're like, well, what do we do? What do we do? And it's like, you can do whatever you want. You're free. In the meantime, though, this whole station is kind of
falling apart,
falling down.
It's falling out of the sky.
Yeah, there's a little showdown between Red Guardian and Taskmaster. They meet in a hallway.
Yeah,
and he's ready to fight. And since the Taskmaster can mimic, that's a standstill, and then this station rips apart, so the Taskmaster falls through and then ends up in the holding cell that Red Guardian was in. You can't break out of it. It's like glass, and can't. So Taskmaster is effectively kind of taken off the table for a little bit, and in that cell. Mm-hmm. So basically, everyone is trying to get out of there, running, just like typical explosion, when the facility is exploding, like in Force Awakens or whatever, they got to get out of there. So everyone's running for their lives. Natasha comes across Taskmaster in the cell. So as she's evacuating, she runs by and sees that the Taskmaster is in the cell, and she has that guilt. Because this was the girl that she thought she had killed, and now the girl has become actually maybe something worse because of her father.
Trying to apologize in her, I don't know, it might be a little out of place, but this is really not exactly the time when all this is happening to be, coming clean and doing this kind of thing. So,
well, I think she was ready to die for it, because she goes, I know if I let you out of here, you're going to kill me.
Right.
Like, I'm no match for you. I know that this is going to happen, but I have to. Like, I'm sorry. Like,
yeah,
I have to kind of let you out. even though
Right.
even though it's not going to be good for her. So she does.
Yeah.
She lets her out, and basically the space station is or it's not in space, but it's up in the clouds, and it's basically falling down. So now we get into like an aerial thing where Natasha kind of dives out. Yelena ends up killing Dreykov. She throws a kind of like a spear bomb into the helicopter as they're getting away. She gets blown off the station also. So she's falling through the air. Natasha dives over.
Goes after her.
Goes after with the parachute, attaches
catches her. She pushes her away, and then Natasha,
because she sees Taskmaster is coming.
Right, miraculously, like pushes herself off of Yelena, so she's flying through the air. Happens to like grab a piece of debris that's falling, and it just happens to be big enough where she's
and they both land on it. Taskmaster lands on it,
and they're fighting on the piece of debris as it's plummeting towards the.
Yes, it gets a little.
It's pretty,
stretching the limits of believability. But
right,
Taskmaster has a parachute, so they're kind of attached to each other fighting, and then the parachute just kind of goes off just before they hit the ground, so they kind of crash to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
There's some more fighting. Taskmaster gets dosed also. She gets freed.
Mm-hmm. And
her first words are, "Is he gone?" Meaning the father. Is he dead? Because she kind of I guess now that she's awakened, has realized, he was mistreating me. Also, this was no life.
Well, she was basically like, he turned her like into Frankenstein's monster. I mean, she was like, she was, and she didn't. It's kind of weird because there's certain scenes where you see her without the mask, and she's so small and frail. But when the mask is on, she's like this towering behemoth.
Yeah, she's really tall.
She's really tall. So it's kind of odd, like that she's like this almost machine-like thing, and then, she's so vulnerable looking when the mask is off.
Yeah, when the mask comes off. Yeah,
right.
it's just a girl. It's a girl. Like basically, it's a girl. It's like a young woman.
Yep.
So yeah, that winds it up. Everybody landed. Red Guardian landed. Melina landed. Yelena landed. Natasha landed. They all kind of are in the same. They kind of regroup. Natasha's like, "I got it." Everybody get out of here. Because that's when Ross is coming in. William Hurt is on the way. The cavalry is on the way.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody get out of here. I'll handle it. I'll take care of it. And it kind of ends that way. Just kind of she's back hiding out again and talking to her black market guy, and he gets her this giant jet and basically ends that she's going to go break out. Help Steve, Captain America, break everybody out of the prison, which would lead to.
This is the moment where she gets
Infinity War.
The jet that you see in Infinity War, when they're on the run with Steve Rogers, and she's got the blonde hair. Yep. And another thing to note is that Yelena this whole time is wearing this vest, this green sort of like
has a lot of pockets.
Has a lot of pockets, like a camping type vest. It's like an outdoorsy, kind of thing, multi-purpose, kind of she ends up wearing it. This is the vest that she's wearing in Infinity War, that nobody really noticed before, but now there's some significance.
It's got a story. Yeah.
So,
and they kind of agree that this was real. Natasha agrees that this was real for her as well.
Yeah.
That this was as close to a family as she has. And that, Yelena was her sister, and that bond is still there.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of fractured family.
And it's at this point
that was there, that kind of came together.
And this is the first time you actually see Natasha actually show some emotion. She starts to cry. There's tears shed, because she's saying sorry to Yelena. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. It all comes to, I guess to, to the surface, more or less. But
and so Red Guardian and Melina limp off.
Yeah,
kind of they go their ways. And Yelena's going to go her own way. And figure out. Actually, she ends up with the widows to try and help them get sorted out as well, and Taskmaster to help all these widows that have been freed are looking for somebody for guidance. So she actually ends up going. Yelena goes with the widows, to kind of help them process this and kind of get through it, which was kind of nice. Also, that they just didn't like leave them to wander the earth and like figure out like what was going on. It's she went with them.
They're all sisters in a sense. They're all like a sisterhood. They all come from the same place. Their parents are probably, they were taken from their parents, or they're dead, or they're probably all mostly orphaned, and that kind of thing. So they all share that, and I think there's like, it was implied that there was widows actually all over the world, that there might be more out there that need to be freed. But of course, this is before Infinity War. So I would think that this, when the snap happened, like, oh, how many of these people actually survived the snap and then came back, after, in Endgame. So
if there's no one to control them as well.
Yeah.
That they kind of left that a little Dracoff was doing that whole exposition. If the one thing the world has plenty of is girls that, could be taken advantage of, so it wasn't clear if he was already looking at ones he was going to abduct, or if those were actually widows. But because there's a part where he's got this like map of the world and all these pictures come up, so it wasn't clear if those were widows or if those were like missing children or orphans that he's going to be able to take and make into more widows down the road.
This is actually a sort of plan B to the Winter Soldier program. When the Winter Soldier program, as we see in Civil War, it didn't exactly work out, because the Winter Soldiers, that they just go berserk and they're pretty much uncontrollable and they're put on ice. And then, that whole story, plays out where Zemo actually kills the ones that were there. But so I guess they went with this plan instead, where they would control and train these little girls to be assassins. And that, that kind of played out as an alternate plan. So, yeah. So there's this talk of them like in Civil War, they're like, these people can go in and they can destroy governments and
topple regimes and all that kind of stuff.
We didn't actually get to see that happen because Thanos shows up and that whole thing.
Kind of like Winter. They're kind of like Winter Soldier light.
The widows. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So the film ends that everything's kind of neatly tied up and it slides right in to fit into the events of Infinity War. But what's a Marvel film without a post-credits sequence? And of course we get one. And it's basically Yelena, and this is this takes place in somewhat of a time leap, by a couple of years or so, maybe even a little less, but she's visiting Natasha's grave. So this is the post-credits scene takes place after Endgame. So after the snap and everybody's been returned, Yelena is visiting Natasha's grave, kind of checking in on her and saying, hey, whatever. And then we get the appearance, which this should have been the first appearance, but it was the second appearance of Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, who was played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And she's kind of she's not Hydra, but she's not S.H.I.E.L.D. She's kind of anti-S.H.I.E.L.D., but she's kind of that Nick Fury type person. Right. And so Black Widow would have been the first introduction to the character, but instead we got her in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Extensively. She had a lot of scenes with John Walker, who was actually the second Cap, and he was kind of disgraced. So she recruited him because she's recruiting people. So she recruited him, gave him a job as U.S. agent. So even though he's no longer Captain America and disgraced, he still can be something. Don't know if he's a hero, but he's reborn or renamed as U.S. agent.
So now we're being introduced to the idea that there's going to be some sort of what I would think is Marvel's version of the Suicide Squad, maybe sort of like they're not really
this
heroes.
This does exist in the comics, the Dark Avengers,
or the Thunderbolts, right?
Or Thunderbolts, yeah. So there is this teasing. So where Yelena is at the grave, all of a sudden Val, short for, shows up. And there's conversation that Yelena is already working for Val. Like you shouldn't be bothering me on my my time off, my vacation. So this implies that she's already been working for Val.
Yeah.
There's like that little bit of banter and yada, yada, yada. And I've got your next mission for you. So obviously there were previous missions. So she's already been recruited by the time the events of, Endgame happen, and also Falcon and Winter Soldier. So Yelena is already kind of set up in the background, I suppose, in Falcon Winter Soldier, because this all happens around the same time. Yeah. So the next mission is to find out. I want you to kill the person who killed Natasha.
Yeah, I want you to get the opportunity to meet and kill the person that killed Natasha. And of course, we know that Natasha dies on another planet in Endgame. And it wasn't obviously Hawkeye's fault. I mean, in fact, Hawkeye was the one who wanted to kill himself. So
she shows him a picture of Hawkeye like on an iPad,
right? So making
and
her think,
and she's like, "Oh, he's kind of cute," and that's how that the post credit sequence ends, which is basically I'm guessing
a setup
for the Hawkeye
for
Disney Plus series,
which it is confirmed that Florence Pugh will appear on the show extensively.
So then there you go.
It's not just a cameo; she will be in the show. Like,
she's probably going to be pursuing him and initially going after him and then figuring out. So yeah, that's Black Widow. A lot of action, a lot of great casting. There's a lot of little scenes that we didn't go over because we don't want to give the whole movie blow by blow. Mm-hmm. A lot of great little scenes, a lot of great banter with Florence Pugh. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the scenes with her and Scarlett Johansson are really good when they're trying to reestablish those sisterly bonds.
Yeah.
But yeah, Florence Pugh has all the best lines. She's got the snappy comebacks. She's got the snarkiness, a lot of great action there as well. Where does this fit in for you?
Well, this movie, I think,
in as far as best medium or not favorite Marvel films,
I liked it. I thought it was solid. I enjoyed it. I didn't go in with a lot of expectation, being that I really enjoyed the ride of the Infinity Saga. For me, Endgame was the big finish for me. So everything that's being rolled out now, I'm just kind of taking it with a grain of salt, and not. I don't think I'm as vested in a lot of the new stuff, but I'm enjoying it.
Is that due to Marvel fatigue?
Maybe, could be. I don't know. But now, I mean, they're rolling out a lot of like weird stuff now, a lot of like things down the road. They're introducing all of these multiverse kind of thing. And I think that's the direction they're taking it. Now with this, I think the critique was that people wanted a much more grounded story for Natasha. And this thing turned out to be, well, like the most ridiculous of James Bond movies.
Yeah.
Like the Roger Moore films where it's spectacle, it's, whatever. And so going back to that, commenting on her being able to survive all the things that she does in this film, which is pretty much more spectacular than anything she's ever done.
Yeah.
in with the Avengers, more or less. Well, I don't know.
I'm gonna put this one actually probably my maybe right above Thor: Dark World as far as least favorites and Captain Marvel. What the thing I have is this film missed so many opportunities.
Yeah,
there were so many missed opportunities. So if you want to take the one part that we were talking about is bone-crushing things, literally bone-crushing things happen to non-superhero characters, right? I mean, in the beginning when they're falling off the roof and Natasha like hits like a dumpster and she hits like five like fire escapes on the way down and she's okay. And then they get into a serious car crash
two car
after
crashes.
That. And she had one before it.
Right.
And so I agree. I was thinking this was going to be more Winter Soldier, small story.
Yeah.
And not so gigantic. And then the Taskmaster was like, for me, was underused. Every time the Taskmaster was about to get going, something happened. She got locked up when she was about to fight Red Guardian, and this floating space, floating station was ripped in half. So Taskmaster fell through. So it was always kind of like teasing Taskmaster and never getting to really see.
Well, it's not the first time that they would do that. You think of Ghost and Ant-Man and Wasp. You think of
and then Red Guardian though too. You have Red Guardian who was underused. Kind of we didn't really get to see those two.
Like you said, he's the goof. He's the comic relief.
He was, but he was there and he had powers and he used during the escape. He's jumping and climbing and doing things. So it would have been nice to see him kind of maybe get a little taste for the glory that he was looking for a little bit more.
I think it's not one of the best. It's not one of my favorites, but it is. It was solid. It was nice to return to the theater to see it. I agree. There are a lot of things that in retrospect you go back and you think, should this film even been made? I mean, is it necessary? Really? I mean, I feel like could this be pandering to the fans that were outraged that Natasha didn't get her big send off like Iron Man did in Endgame and. So is this a response to that? Is this an afterthought?
I think it was always in the works. It was just a matter of finding the right time to make it, and then Endgame happened. It's like, okay, well, we still wanted to make this film, so how do we do it?
I personally think that they should have released this film before Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel, I feel, should have been the first movie of Phase 4, in my humble opinion. I think they shoehorned that movie in between Infinity War and Endgame unnecessarily. If you think about it, I mean, I'd have totally bought the idea that she could have shown up in Endgame and not known, nobody's ever seen her before. I would have bought it.
Yeah.
More, like they introduced Black Panther in Civil War. They dropped Spider-Man into it. I think they could have easily done the same thing with Captain Marvel and still played out that idea. Like, who the hell are you? Where have you been all this time? They still could have done all that.
Well, I think it also comes down to money at that point too. Is you want to get, Captain Marvel isn't not a top tier Marvel character, like, and didn't have the pedigree of having 2 Avengers movies before it. So putting it in between those films, especially with what Infinity War did, you get that momentum that Marvel had and able to kind of get some good box office out of it as well. So I would have rather seen this film made in the time that it took place.
That's right.
Inserted after Civil War and giving her that, but they had their slate planned out, and I guess there was no.
I would have liked to seen Cap in this movie, Cap and Falcon. I would have liked to seen her. It would have been cool for them to show up at some point in the film, especially at the end.
Yeah.
Why it doesn't make any sense to me.
Anything, Falcon. I mean, Chris Evans is done. His contract is over, so he's not.
No,
he's
I'm
not
just
doing
saying,
anything else,
but they could have had a little cameo at the end where instead of the guy giving her the plane, it should have been Cap and Falcon, right? I think it's not her. She didn't break everybody out of prison. Cap did.
No, she was going to meet up with him. Yeah, she's like, I'm going to break some Avengers.
I'm going to break some Avengers, but Cap already did that. So you're pretty much changing that.
Well, this was kind of leading. This was setting it up before. So I'm guessing somewhere in there she had spoken with Captain America, like, oh, here's what we want to do. We want to get him out. And then she's got this guy delivers a nice jet. And so she's like, oh, okay, well, this is perfect because
that would have made a nice,
go break some, like, they didn't explain it, but I think it's kind of,
it would have made a nice, there's usually 2 end credit scenes. There's, the movie ends and then they'll show the credits in some sort of animated,
a mid-credit scene.
And then an end credit scene.
Yeah.
That could have been a cool scene where they're in the jet and she turns to Cap and says, so did you ever fight? Red Guardian
or something.
I was on ice
the
whole time.
Yeah.
And that
was a curious scene for me as well, though. That was just like that was a weird scene where he was saying how he fought Captain America. And then the guy basically says Captain America was on ice.
So how do you know that?
Is Red Guardian a lot? Because we know it. Because we know he wasn't thawed until
how does he
before.
know it? How does a Russian prisoner know Cap was on ice all the time?
Well, because I'm sure they read the news, right?
Okay.
I mean, it was big news. So it was just kind of strange that Red Guardian lies about it. The guy calls him on it and is correct, and it's never revisited again. Like, he doesn't say, well, I made those stories up. Like, it would have been nice for him to acknowledge it.
It's just him. It's his ego. It's like he's just trying to be.
Yeah, so a lot of screenwriting ish, like that was my problem with it. Is a lot of that kind of stuff they could have spent a little more time on. Made the action sequences smaller, and spent more time character building and building that relationship. Like something like in Winter Soldier, where it was more espionage and more going through and figuring out, and there is a shadowy figure, right? Because there kind of was, like Alexander Pierce, like the Robert Redford character, similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
But handled in a different way, and that action was a lot more realistic, but you had Cap in it. And so I like the set. I like the action. I like the prison escape. I like the avalanches coming. I thought all that kind of stuff was great. But for me, it's going to rank lower on the Marvel scale for me.
I didn't care for the idea that the Red Room, this mysterious Red Room, which we've been introduced to, like I said, with the Joss Whedon films. You kind of get the impression, though, that it's like it takes a long time for these girls to develop, and they're not always going to be in one place, So that for me, it's like all this takes place in this thing in the sky. Is that what they're saying? Like this is it. They're not being trained here, there. Like typically you see in spy movies.
Yeah, I guess they get trained there and then they get released.
Because you see in Ultron, you see her being trained by a woman. it's not him. It's a woman. So there's obviously other people involved in the training and all that kind of thing, which I think is more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, I had no expectations. I enjoyed it. It's solid, mid-range for me.
Yeah, it's definitely a recommended watch, just because of the family dynamic, that kind of stuff, and it's great to see like the original Black Widow, nice Melina, and moments.
Which is what you come to Marvel movies to see anyway.
Yep.
For me, that's I always came back to these films because of these character moments and this character building. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll give it a medium, not a thumbs down, not a thumbs up. I'm going to be in the middle. What about you?
Yeah, me too.
In the middle?
I mean, if I had to say like 5, I got maybe it's about a solid 3.5.
I wish I could have hated it that much. I watched it twice in a row.
Yeah. It served. I think it served a purpose. It served its purpose. I really like the character of Yelena.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing her again. There's a lot of setting up in this.
Yeah, they did. They definitely did kind of, and that was the thing, was to pass the torch to Florence Pugh also as the next Black Widow character.
Yeah.
Which is kind of nice too. I like what they did with her, and I like they probably spent more time actually setting her up than they gave to Natasha, actually, because we kind of already knew Natasha's story and what her quest was. So it was nice that Yelena, Florence Pugh's character, got a lot of her backstory, where she's not the same as Natasha. She's spunkier. She takes less crap. So she's not a carbon copy of Natasha when she becomes the new Black Widow or whatever happens to her. She is not cut from the same cloth, even though they are quote unquote sisters.
And you might, the title implies that I don't think it's necessarily just talking about Natasha Romanoff. It's the entire program. It's Yelena. It's Black Widow.
All of them.
All of them. And that's the story. It's the story of these poor girls this happened to them. And,
absolutely.
So
that's going to do it for Black Widow from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like we said, the first film in phase 4. So this is the next kind of chapter, or I don't know what this is, what the phases are. I don't know if we're going to find out one day what they all mean, or if they have names besides phase 1, 2, and 3, right? Like if it's a chapter in something larger that we don't know,
right?
But this is the first one in phase 4. So we appreciate you checking us out. We are on social media, Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast. So we're real easy to find there. Let us know what you feel about Black Widow. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you agree? Did you disagree? Hit us up on social media, Instagram and Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us there. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast provider. And for Eric, this has been Dean. And we are going to ask you to please be kind and rewind.
You've been listening to the 3324 Podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast and on Twitter at 3324P to join the conversation.